Hello, innovators, changemakers, and entrepreneurs. This podcast features stories about the people, past, present, and future, who change the world. They make decisions and take actions enlivened by what I call the entrepreneur's ethic. The entrepreneur's ethic infuses people, organization, and places where the future is created and the world is made a better place. We're in the last days of 2023, so I decided to put out a special episode that will serve as an end cap for the year. The word Zeitgeist comes straight from German. Zeit means time, and Geist means spirit. And the spirit of the time is what's going on culturally or intellectually during a certain period. I'll take a shot at a part of the spirit of the time, the end of 2023, where I'm plugged in, what I'll call the Entrepreneurial Zeitgeist. What's potentially interesting or notable for changemakers, innovators, and entrepreneurs in late 2023? Is there anything that we can learn from the stories of the 5 historic entrepreneurs featured so far in this podcast that may be relevant to the entrepreneurial zeitgeist today? As a reminder, those entrepreneurs have been Francis Cabot Lowell, Walt Disney, John Deere, Ewing Kauffman, and Henry Ford. I'll make 5 observations, explain each, and extract what we might learn from the decision-making of each of these entrepreneurs for today's world. Entrepreneurial Zeitgeist observation number 1. Technology frontiers are predictably unpredictable. I remember when I started my first company in the 1990s, e-markets. We had gotten a couple of years into it. We got a few major agribusiness customers launching software on the internet for agricultural businesses to do electronic commerce. And we began the process of looking for our first outside capital. We met with one investor. And remember, his observation in telling us no, he was not interested in investing, was justified by 2 different things. Number one, he wasn't sure whether we had proven yet that we could get big customers, as I think we had DuPont, Dow, and Land O'Lakes. That was a bit of a head scratcher for me, but fair enough. The second thing he said, I remember even better. He said, I'm just not sure that the internet is going to turn out to be that big of a deal. Well, it did. Now, to give him justice, it is hard to predict the future. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what is a big deal and what may be a fad, but certainly the internet was big. Well, what about 2023? Certainly a lot of the discussion and the experience in the technology area, at least, has been about artificial intelligence. In particular, it reached a new level of public conscience, I guess you would say, through OpenAI's ChatGPT, but there's plenty of other tools as well. The adoption of ChatGPT since its launch has been remarkably swift, even in the world of software, and very widespread. I gathered for purposes of today a few statistics. So first, rapid growth in users. ChatGPT experienced a significant surge in user numbers since the introduction. It reached 1 million users within just a few days of its November launch in 2022. And by January of early this year, 2023, it already amassed 100 million monthly active users. The latest number I could get was for this last August 2023, and the number of users had grown to be just over 180 million people, with their website garnering over 1.5 billion monthly visits. ChatGPT has also seen significant adoption among developers and large corporations. Over 2 million software developers are using ChatGPT to write software code. And apparently more than 92% of Fortune 500 companies have incorporated ChatGPT into their operations in some way, shape, or form. I looked up revenue as well. I am one of the $20 per month users of ChatGPT. They're projecting that it'll generate $200 million in revenue by the end of this year, 2023, and it's expected to reach $1 billion in revenue next year in 2024. And the valuation for the company was at $29 billion, following the most recent investment led by Microsoft in their $10 billion funding round. So is artificial intelligence more like the internet or more like, well, let's say blockchain? Is it a new frontier or just a new tool? Well, I have to lean, as I think many others do, that it's more toward a new frontier. Artificial intelligence enables new ways of doing things by both individuals and organizations. That can be writing software code, generation of text and images, more ways to interact with technology using our voices instead of keyboards and other tools. Our natural way of communicating suddenly allows us to interact in new ways with software and with computers. So how might artificial intelligence shape the world? Well, let's look back to one of the entrepreneurs that we featured this season, Henry Ford, on episode 18. Of course, what he brought to the world was the Model T, which brought automobiles to the masses. And we learned in that case study, the Ford Motor Company was in fact Henry Ford's third startup business. And his first was closed down. His second startup ultimately became Cadillac, but it took him into his third startup before he achieved his major success. Late in his life, Henry Ford made a comment to somebody asking him about the bygone era, and he snapped at them, "Young man, I invented the modern age." Ford had a considerable ego, obviously, but to understand his impact, particularly through development of the Model T, is to understand the advent of a new age, an age that largely remains intact even to today. Think of what here's today that was designed for cars. Cities, interstates, highways, drive-ins, drive-throughs, drive-ups, hotels, motels. Zoning laws lay out how many parking spaces are required for certain types of buildings. Speed laws regulate how fast we're supposed to drive. Federal laws regulate how much gasoline should be used for auto manufacturers' average sold vehicles. State laws require a license for you to drive, but you can drive before you can vote and before you can drink. Cars are part of the culture, and we can point back to Henry Ford's work in the first years of the 20th century for what it all got started. Will artificial intelligence be an agent of cultural change analogous to automobiles in any way? Will artificial general intelligence be realized? Artificial general intelligence refers to a type of artificial intelligence that has the ability to understand, learn, and apply its intelligence to a wide range of problems, much like a human being. Unlike narrow or weak artificial intelligence, which is designed to perform specific tasks, like voice recognition or maybe playing a game, AGI can theoretically be applied to any problem requiring cognitive abilities. Achieving artificial general intelligence would represent a significant breakthrough, as it would mean creating machines with versatility and general intelligence of human beings. What, if anything, can we learn from Henry Ford and apply to this? Well, I think first that it takes time. First experiments that Henry Ford had with thinking about automobiles occurred in the early 1890s. His third startup, the one that would ultimately scale, Ford Motor Company, came in 1903, and the Model T wasn't introduced until 1908. Second, it takes millions. When millions of people use something, it can create cultural, social, and economic change of significance. ChatGPT adoption is certainly off to a good start, citing the statistics that I did earlier. Though I do have to say that when I used ChatGPT for some assignments this last semester for the first time, a surprisingly low percentage of them had ever had experience using ChatGPT. Perhaps they've been scared off by other professors that represented it as some form of academic dishonesty, but I wanted to learn along with the students over how ChatGPT could help them do their assignments better. And for many of them, it was their first exposure to that. Finally, is artificial intelligence dangerous? Or at some level, is it dangerous? Sam Altman, the CEO and co-founder of OpenAI, the organization behind the development of ChatGPT, acknowledged the potential risk associated with artificial intelligence, as have many others. He's emphasized the importance of developing and deploying it responsibly. He's talked about that publicly. It's part of the founding of OpenAI. His concerns, as I understand them at least, primarily revolve around the misuse of artificial intelligence technology and the potential for unintended consequences. He believes that while it has enormous potential benefit for humanity, it poses significant risk if not properly managed. Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX and Tesla, who also was involved in the founding of OpenAI before having a break, also has made a lot of public expressions of potential danger regarding artificial intelligence. Most famously, I think he's warned that AI could become a significant threat to humanity if not properly controlled. And his centers are really concerned around the possibility of artificial intelligence surpassing human intelligence, a concept referred to as superintelligence, leading to scenarios where AI could act in ways that aren't aligned with human interest. And so he's advocated regulations. My take, any technology can be dangerous or at least have unanticipated risk. And cars are certainly an example. People die in cars. I can remember when they changed the speed limit on interstates from 55 miles per hour to higher than that in the 1990s. There were many that predicted more people would die, which happened. But is there any potential for us to go back to slower speed limits? I don't think so. There's trade-offs that people understand. The internet, the frontier technology that I started my first business to exploit. Has that been good, or is there danger from that? Well, there's been recent studies that show, based upon test scores and other measures, social media seems to make young people at least dumber and sadder. And we could talk about pornography and its impacts, and it's just not good. Certainly a lot of danger. But I remain unconvinced at the danger of superintelligence, although I understand it probably has risk to disagree with something asserted by Elon Musk because he's a smart guy and has been really successful. You know, I like the movies, The Terminator and The Matrix back in the day, but maybe I didn't take them as seriously as some of those folks. Machines that are better than humans are great tools. In this podcast, we talked about John Deere and the first efforts to develop what today we call a tractor. Tractors are better than horses pulling plows back then and doing a lot of things now, much more powerful. Automobiles are better than walking or horses. Jackhammers are better than sledgehammers. Computers are better than typewriters and adding machines. All good. But I don't see artificial general intelligence doing more than enhancing human productivity and maybe creativity, but not replacing the second most powerful force in the universe, human imagination. There is a spirit to human imagination, and that spirit will not be anything more than copied by machines, in my view, and copied weakly in my estimation. All right, moving on. Entrepreneurial Zeitgeist observation number 2. Hardware is hard. Biology is really hard. Agriculture is really, really hard. In episode 11, I interviewed Colin Hurd, CEO of Mach. We talked a lot about that notion that developing autonomous machines in the off-road space, he had made tremendous progress, but when you're combining development of AI software along with hardware and how it interacts with human beings that are operating the machines, it's difficult. The timelines are long compared to a software-only business. In episode 19, I interviewed Joel Harris, CEO of Genvax, who's developing vaccines using messenger RNA technology, among other things, to develop vaccines for the livestock industry for things like African swine fever. If developing hardware is hard, work at the level of the cell. Biology is really hard. I recently was in Boston and had a conversation with a friend that is in agricultural technology investing, and he has a much broader view than what I do. And he went through that here at the end of 2023, it's a really tough landscape. Many of the investments in the businesses have struggled for some of the reasons that hardware is hard, biology is hard. It's been hard to develop products that scale in the space. And so some investors at least have soured a bit on the idea of investing in agricultural technology businesses. And I got another stark reminder of it this week when I learned that a company called Cook's Venture has closed for a lack of being able to get additional funding. Cook's Venture has a special breed of chicken that just tastes better. And I was a fan and a customer, and Patty and I went on their website to reorder, and there was nothing to order. And I thought that was strange. Thought maybe they'd had a run on supplies at the end of the year. But then I got a note from somebody who said the company's closed. There's a good reason that they're not taking orders anymore. But anyway, just another example and reminder over doing things in agriculture, in a mature industry, where biology plays a role, where markets play a role, where competition is very difficult, is really challenging. And so I hearken back to episode 9 with John Deere, the man before the company. And so the episode was about when John Deere said no to tractors, doing some early experiments in the late 1850s. And during that time in the 1850s, everyone could see that tractors could potentially be a useful technology. But Deere's realization is that they weren't technically feasible. At that time, they were being developed with steam engines, and all that he could determine was steam engines powering a tractor were not feasible. Might be feasible for a railroad locomotive, it might be feasible for a boat on the water, but not feasible for what we would today call a tractor. Ultimately, tractors were waiting for what would become internal combustion engines, but that would occur decades later. And part of the lesson from that case was that tractors didn't outnumber horses and mules in the United States until the 1940s. Almost 100 years after Deere's first experiments with tractors, and 60 years after his death. So what can we learn from Deere? Well, entrepreneur's ethic number 6 is enjoy the edge. And this is about being curious, conducting experiments, but also learning along the way not to overcommit resources too early. Entrepreneurial Zeitgeist observation number 3. A world with 5% interest rates or higher changes capital markets. Big capital allocators changed their portfolios. The world of 0% interest rates probably wasn't healthy in the long run anyway, but it certainly put more capital into venture capital funds and made, broadly at least, early stage capital for startups more available. Will interest rates go up or down? I don't know, but my bias is that 0% probably won't return. Peter Zion is a geopolitical strategist, not an economist, that I follow, although maybe that makes his economic predictions better than most economists. He talks about really long-term trends influencing interest rates, and the one that he points to is that baby boomers in the United States are retiring, and so they're pulling their capital out of more liquid assets into spending, and overall capital availability is going to go down. And so supply and demand, interest rates are going to go up. Will that prediction hold to be true? I don't know, but I think it does make some sense. And so venture capital investment in the United States in 2019 was $137 billion. 2020, it was $164 billion. 2021, $330 billion. 2022, $238 billion. So it went back down, and 2023 will likely be 1/2 of 2022 and be lower than it was back in 2018. And so it's not a great insight on my part to say that raising risk capital dollars to fund new businesses, projects, and programs is difficult in almost any circumstance. And it will be a bit more difficult in an environment with higher interest rates, as some of these capital allocators allocate their capital to lower risk, but now interest-paying sort of investments. Episode 5 was about Walt Disney and his first breakout animated character, and, hint, hint, that character was not a mouse. But Disney struggled for more than a decade after starting his business with money. There was never enough. The Disney case study in the upcoming book will be on the making of Disney's first full-feature animated movie, Snow White. Disney violated one of my maxims of business management, never run out of cash, before the film was completed. What became a huge hit and a basis for what we know as an entertainment colossus today very well could have died in 1937 if not for some very entrepreneurial moves by Walt Disney to find additional funds. You need to sell and then resell your financiers on your vision. Entrepreneurial Zeitgeist observation number 4. Let profits be your guide. Back to OpenAI. Founder and CEO Sam Altman was let go by OpenAI's board in a drama-filled week, and then he found his way back to the business with the very considerable assistance of OpenAI's largest investor, Microsoft, and its very savvy CEO, Satya Nadella. OpenAI appears to this outsider to have some significant governance issues, shall we say. It was originally set up as a not-for-profit before realizing that the expense of scaling artificial intelligence was significant, and a lot of outside capital would be required. There are certainly reasons to form not-for-profit corporations, but in my view, not nearly as many as we have not-for-profit corporations. The profit motive and the discipline it takes to actually achieve profits is highly valuable and also highly ethical. Effective altruism always gave me pause, or what came to be called effective altruism, and the Sam Bankman-Fried episode, another 2023 event that isn't good in entrepreneurship circles, only confirmed that suspicion. When we buy something in a free enterprise system, we perceive its value, and it's typically a win-win trade. An underrated concept from economics is something called consumer surplus. Consumer surplus refers to the difference between the total amount that consumers are willing and able to pay for a good or service and the total amount that they actually pay. It represents the benefit or surplus enjoyment that consumers get from purchasing a product at a price lower than the maximum price they would be willing to pay. Think about a product you've purchased and that you use a lot and value. Perhaps that's your smartphone. Maybe you think that your smartphone, in my case an iPhone, costs too much at $800 or even more if you have a newer iPhone than I have. But still, would you pay more for it if you couldn't get it at a price similar to what you got it for? My guess is probably so, and that goes for almost all the products that you buy. We may not like the price. We might wish that it would be lower, but at the end of the day, would we pay more if we had to? Probably so. In episode number 14, we met Ewing Kauffman of Kansas City, and we learned about his efforts to form up an alternative talent development program for Major League Baseball. Kauffman's superpower was in helping other people succeed, and that helped him build a billion-dollar business, Marion Laboratories. Talent development is necessary in baseball, in business, and in, well, everything. But Kauffman was also guided by the numbers. Numbers for baseball players like foot speed, batting practice reps, etc., but also financial numbers. He learned actually that baseball was a tough investment financially and a hard business. But still, today there is a Major League Baseball team that exists because of him, the Kansas City Royals, and one that's managed to win 2 World Series titles in its history. And there are programs at his foundation, the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, that aim to help entrepreneurs build profitable businesses still today. Entrepreneurial Zeitgeist observation number 5. Don't let your imagination fail. In October of this year, Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz published his Techno-Optimist Manifesto. The article laid out several key arguments. First, that technology is the foundation of civilization. He argues that technological advancements have been the driving force behind progress and the creation really of civilization itself. He cites examples like agriculture, medicine, and the internet as evidence of technology's positive impact. Next, he wrote about unrestricted growth. According to Andreessen, technological development leads to economic growth and ultimately improves living standards for everyone. He contends that anxieties about automation and job displacement that new technologies tend to bring are unfounded, and new technologies create more jobs than they eliminate. Next, he talked about upwing versus downwing. He introduced a new political paradigm, if you will, dividing people into upwinger optimists who embrace technological progress and downwinger pessimists who fear it. He advocated for an upwing approach, encouraging unfettered technological advancement and societal change. He also talked about enlightenment values. He emphasized the importance of things like reason, science, individualism, and free speech in driving technological process and in building a better future. The arguments in the manifesto have generated substantial discussion and debate, with some praising Andreessen's optimism and others critiquing his oversimplification of complex issues. Virginia Postrel, guest on episode 2 about the role of textiles in histories and culture, offered very thoughtful critique that you can find on her highly recommended Substack. Guest Dr. Josh Storrs Hall on episode 20 spoke about why we don't have flying cars, citing one important reason as a failure of imagination. In episode 1, we met historic American entrepreneur Francis Cabot Lowell and learned about the role of rum distilling in American manufacturing and his first experiments in rum distilling. Lowell was a fascinating bundle of mathematical, mechanical, and financial talents. He used rum distilling to learn about building a business that built and made things as opposed to his trading and merchant business. He would go on to do significant things at Boston Manufacturing Company, effectively the first integrated large-scale manufacturing business in the early history of the United States. and providing really a template for a particularly American way of doing business. Lowell engaged his imagination through trying new things, applying analytical rigor to production processes, and envisioning how to scale that could achieve better quality products at lower cost, thereby enabling new markets. So don't let your imagination fail. But let's extend that, taking even more inspiration from Lowell. Imagination is a necessary but not sufficient condition for entrepreneurial outcomes. You also have to take action. Ideas are many. Those who can execute those ideas in their imaginations are few. Ideas to action. Entrepreneur's ethic number one that Francis Cabot Lowell embodied is make things happen. Thanks to you all for supporting this podcast, but also thanks for making things happen in 2023, and best wishes for making more things happen in 2024.